Before the first kinslaying, Alqualondë begins as a harbour, pearl halls, lamps, sea light, and the patient craft of a people taught by the waters. The ships are already characters before anyone tries to steal them. White swan prows, gold beaks, gold and jet eyes, and sea memory made visible in timber. Each curve carries labour, memory, and sea wisdom. The ships enter as made love before they become the object of demand. The harbour gate is living rock, carved by the sea itself. Beauty comes first, so the later violence arrives as desecration. There is a source seam at the center of Alqualondë. The published account gives the event sequence. Later Galadriel material adds kinship, defense, and moral pressure. Keep the order in view: craft, demand, blood, doom. The harbour begins as made peace. Fëanor turns craft into need. Kin meet kin under lamps. The doom gives the wound a future. The wound stays open across the sources. They give sequence, later memory, kinship, defense, and guilt, while the exact first blow remains outside any single all-seeing vantage. The Noldor lave under unmeasured darkness. The trees are dead, the oath has been sworn, and Fëanor has turned grief into motion. Yet a host needs ships to cross the sea. The road to Middle-earth demands a fleet, and the Noldor lack the time and craft to build vessels large enough for all who have been stirred into exile. From there Fëanor looks toward Alqualondë, and in the logic of necessity, the ships become a solution, while in the logic of the Telerin, they remain lives made visible in timber and sail. The oath has already changed the weather inside every decision, making delay feel like betrayal and refusal feel like enmity. Alqualondë receives the Noldor at the point where grief has begun to mistake resistance for treason. Fëanor speaks to the Telerin as he spoke in Telerin, trying to turn injury into common cause. He wants the Telerin to join the revolt, or at least lend what the revolt requires. Olwë refuses with the steadiness of someone preserving friendship through rebuke. He defines friendship as the courage to resist folly. The Telerin keep faith with the Vala and refuse to help turn grief into rebellion. Then Olwë says the sentence that makes the harbour morally legible. The ships are to the Telerin the work of our hearts, irreplaceable things shaped by a people and a lifetime. Fëanor should understand this more than anyone alive, and the tragedy is that he does understand it. The comparison to the gems carries the argument. Olwë is speaking to Fëanor in the language Fëanor ought to know best, the language of making, love, and irreplaceable craft. Fëanor understands the moral force of the refusal and decides to overpower it. After the refusal, Fëanor withdraws outside the walls of Alqualondë and sits in dark thought. Violence waits in the interval after persuasion fails and pride remains. He waits until his host is assembled and until he judges his strength enough. The next movement leaves appeal, argument, and desperate pleading behind and becomes force under the lamps of the Swan Haven. Force enters the ships before the battle has a name. Fëanor's people begin to man the vessels that are anchored in the haven and to take them away from those who made them. The Telerin resist with their bodies before the struggle becomes a sword fight. They cast many of the Noldor into the sea, and for a moment the harbour still holds at the edge of slaughter. The distinction is narrow, but it matters. The source begins with refusal, resistance, bodies in the water, and then the terrible crossing from force to bloodshed. Then swords are drawn beneath the lamps of Alqualondë, and the first civil bloodshed of the elves begins. With Morgoth's armies absent, every figure belongs somewhere inside the family of the Eldar, which is why the word kinslaying has a colder weight than battle. The battle climbs onto the ships themselves, and the logic turns brutal. The sacred craft object becomes the platform of its own desecration. The ships are being fought over and violated at the same time. They are prize, weapon, bridge, and victim, all under the white curves of their own swan necks. It spills across the quays and piers, where the lamps that once made the harbour lovely now make kin visible to kin. Even the great arch of living rock is caught in it. The city loses every neutral angle from which to watch. Fëanor's people are driven back 3 times. The Telerin resist fiercely in the source, with courage and with the tools they have. Then Fingon arrives with the foremost of Fingolfin's host. He finds battle already joined and his own kin falling. The published account says they rush in before they rightly know the cause of the quarrel. Some think the Telerin are waging the Noldor in march at the bidding of the Valar. Misunderstanding leaves the deed guilty, while showing how quickly violence manufactures its own explanation. With that added force, the Telerin are overcome. The source notes the imbalance plainly. The Noldor have become fierce and desperate, while the Telerin are less prepared for war and armed mostly with slender bows. Many mariners of Alqualondë are slain, and the harbor's beauty becomes part of the indictment. Pearl, lamp, swanprow, and blood remain in one frame. The crime reaches beyond killing into the very place where peace was made visible. The source describes the Telerin as a people prepared for sea watch and defense, while the rebellion has already armed itself by forge and oath. The imbalance is visible in solemn proportion. At this point, the source seam returns with real force. A late memory leaf gives Galadriel a different position from any simple rebel line. She is of Finarfin's house, kin to Olwë through Eowyn, and Tolkien's later thought repeatedly sets her against Fëanor. In one late account, she and Celeborn fight in defense of Alqualondë. In another line of late thought, she fights fiercely against Fëanor in defense of her mother's kin. Letter 353 goes further in moral summary, calling her unstained and an enemy of Fëanor. The published battle remains the main sequence. The late Galadriel material remains a pressure against simple collective blame. Both accounts can sit under the same harbor light while resisting a tidy correction. The harbor divides the leaf into 2 memories. One side preserves the published sequence at the ships, the other preserves a late memory of defense. The same lamplight falls across both. The Noldor draw the white ships away and row north along the coast. The stolen fleet moves, and the sea rejects the theft. Olwë calls upon Osse, the sea power bound to the Telerin's history, yet the Valar hold back direct force and leave the flight unstopped. Uinen answers as grief in the shape of water. She weeps for the mariners of the Telerin, and the sea itself rises against the slayers. This storm is mourning becoming consequence, wave and foam carrying the moral pressure that the Valar themselves leave unenforced by direct violence. Many of the ships are wrecked, and many aboard are drowned. Theft begins by losing what it stole. After long marching in the unmeasured night, the Noldor reach the borders of Ahriman. There a dark figure stands upon a rock above the shore, and the host is commanded to listen. The voice may be Mandos himself or a herald of Manwë. The uncertainty of the speaker leaves the words hard. The doom arrives as consequence spoken aloud. The Noldor already know enough to understand why the words have found them. The doom names tears, exile, the oath that will drive and betray, treason of kin against kin, and death by weapon, torment, and grief. The short anchor is enough, tears unnumbered. The rest of the First Age will spend itself proving the sentence true. The prophecy reaches farther than Alqualondë, but it begins there. Kin blood on the keys becomes treachery in later halls, suspicion between houses, and the recurring failure of victory to stay clean. Finarfin turns back from the road in grief sharpened by kinship, because Olwë is bound to his own house through Eowyn. The blood on the key reaches his own house. Many return with him and receive pardon. His sons and the greater host keep moving, because kinship pulls in more than one direction, and the oath has already begun to deform choice. This is one of the road's quieter cruelties. The same family bond that turns Finarfin homeward helps keep others moving forward, and lineage keeps pointing more than one way. In the far north, the earlier crime narrows into a practical fact. The ships that remain are too few to carry all the host. Fear of treachery is already awake among the Noldor, and Fëanor answers fear by making it true. He and his sons take the ships secretly with those they trust, leaving Fingolfin's people in Ahriman. Fëanor's host lands first in Middle-earth at Drengist, and the crossing could still become a ferry if anyone in command chose kinship over possession. Maithros asks the obvious humane question: which ships will be sent back, and whom will they bring first? He names Fingon, once his friend, and the question briefly opens the door that the story is about to close. Fëanor answers by fire, and the short anchor is terrible because it is so practical: let the ships burn. At Losgar, the fairest vessels that ever sailed the sea become a red signal in the dark. The burning becomes a second crime against the Telerin's work, and Fëanor's crime against his own allies, because the stolen bridge becomes ash in the place where kinship could still have crossed. Fingolfin's people see the burning from afar. The distance makes the scene crueler. The red light carries its own message, and every watcher knows what it means. The sequence is almost mercilessly clear. The ships taken from the Telerin are now denied even to the Noldor who helped win them. The first fruit of the Kinslaying is betrayal among the Kinslayers. With the ships gone, the Helcaraxë becomes the only road left to Fingolfin's host. The ice is therefore consequence in the shape of a landscape, a path made necessary by betrayal. They cross through grinding ice and deadly cold, and Olwë is lost with many others. The exile reaches Middle-earth diminished before it has won a single battle there. When they arrive at last, small love remains for Fëanor or his sons. That estrangement belongs among the things born at Alqualondë and fed at Losgar. The closing returns to the harbour. The stolen ships have burned, and the wound remains. Tolkien says more of the Kinslaying is told in the Noldor, the fall of the Noldor made by Magla before he was lost. Magla stands inside the disaster he laments. The song is made from within the house that helped cause the grief, and it becomes one of the few ways the story can look back while refusing false repair. The closing returns to a body on the quay, remembered by song, while the lamps of Alqualondë keep shining over the blood already spilled.